Hi, everybody, and welcome to this screencast on growing student mindsets with the Thinking Classroom. This is a presentation that had been delivered at the 2017 OAME annual conference. So that's the Ontario Association for Mathematics Educators Conference. It was held May 11th to the 13th in Kingston, Ontario. My name is Chris Stewart, and again, this is the presentation that was delivered in Kingston. You'll see some contact information at the bottom of the screen, so do feel free at any time to reach out with your questions or inquiries, and I will certainly respond to you as soon as I can. So as a provocation and perhaps some inspiration, this is something that I read from Will Richardson probably about a year to a year and a half ago, and it's certainly something that has been with me forever, but perhaps not articulated in the same manner. So I want to share that with you right now. So doing the right thing in schools starts with one fairly straightforward question, and that is, what do you believe about how kids learn most powerfully and deeply in their lives? And then once you've answered that as an individual, then as your school community, we need to be asking the following. Does our practice in classrooms with kids honor those beliefs? So you'll find that throughout the screencast, it's being done in a particular or from a particular platform known as Edpuzzle. And within Edpuzzle, the video will pause here and there, and will give you an opportunity to reflect and to respond to the prompts that are provided. Those responses you give then will allow me to interact online with you in perhaps providing some feedback or sharing some of my own thinking on these particular topics. And we'll talk more about Edpuzzle in just a few moments. So you'll notice that the video will most likely be prompting you, or the website that you're on will be prompting you to provide a response. So in order that you're able to do so, you'll need an account with edpuzzle.com. It is free to use. It is entirely educational based, and I use it in the classroom frequently. So if you go to edpuzzle.com and enter the following code, you'll be registered into my Flipped Professional Learning Network class. And within that classroom setting, you'll then have the ability to respond to the questions or prompts provided throughout the presentation. So let's move forward. So I do want to share with you student voice, as really the presentation is very much about culturing student voice in our schools and our classrooms, and then helping students see that and be empowered to moving towards action. So I'm going to call this getting out of the way, and it is the one thing that took me a long time to recognize, but something that I'm certainly practicing and appreciating more and more, and so are my students, in getting out of the way and letting them try things out. This is a video. As I'm screencasting now, you're going to notice that the video pauses and a link comes up. That will link to a video that features the experiences of some of my students here at North Grenville High School in Kemptville, Ontario. And it is about moving from student voice to student action. So please do take a moment. It's fantastic work that the students have done and very inspiring. So as far as the session from OAME and our time here together online is concerned, this was the proposal sent into OAME and accepted for presentation. So really I'm going to block out some of this. We'll focus in on what's most important. And ultimately what I want you to get out of this presentation is an engagement in thinking about our actions and potential outcomes that are going to grow our classrooms and school communities. we need to focus on the application of research-based strategies and innovations. So it's not merely a matter of lore or intuition, but rather it's although it does call upon some of that, really we need to focus on applying research-based strategies and innovations, and then assessing how close we are to what is actually going on within our classroom practice. Throughout the presentation, there will be an emphasis on culturing student voice and building what we call thinking classrooms. And within my own practice, we took the opportunity to engage students as partners, not just in doing the work, but rather the work being the research. So making them an integral component of the research process. And then also something for us to think about is, because of all of that, because we're engaged in research with our students, is that we need to examine the impact of our intentionality and the application of accountable talk strategies. So where to begin? Well, like all action-based research, or any research for that matter, we do need to start with a theory of action. So my proposition was, that is to myself, to my students, is that if we effectively group ourselves and are accountable to talk during the course of learning, and that we do often and effectively use and teach those moves, all the while promoting mathematical discourse, then we should notice a shift. So a measurable positive shift in our classroom culture. So as far as culture is concerned, there are a number of different indicators. So we could look at there being more discussion and student-led discussion. We can look at grist of those ideas. So where the ideas are sourced from, that being student-generated, how many, the depth of those ideas, etc. And also we can look at the following, and drawn from the 5 practices for orchestrating productive math discussions, these were 3 that I felt would be good for us to begin with as a group. So students feeling entitled to share their thinking, an expectation to participate, and also an expectation that we need to arrive at an understanding through reasoned inquiry, as opposed to simply adopting what we're told. And as far as achievement is concerned, we can measure that in terms of achievement, and we can also look at that in terms of self-reflection. So that is students noticing a change for themselves. So what you're seeing highlighted in black, those are the indicators that were used in the work done with students here at North Grenville. These questions were then packaged into a survey, and most importantly, it wasn't just a matter of rating one's agreement to or disagreement to a particular prompt, but rather there was a call for students to explain their choice. So certainly adding more qualitative data to the process. The end of the survey, students were informed that by the end of semester we would return to the same survey to try to measure change. So as a result of the diagnostic, so the survey that went out, you can see that we have about just over 90% of students who are in sort of a neutral to an agreement with the following statement. So nearly 60% in agreement with the statement that they feel deserving and expected to question and comment on ideas that are presented in class. The second question, that one's ideas are taken seriously, you can certainly see a lot of agreement and strong agreement coming from the part of students with some uncertainty. And lastly, the third question, we see strong agreement and agreement with learning mathematics through reasoned inquiry. So all in all, the results from the beginning of the semester, and that is semester 1 here at North Grenville of the 2016-17 school year, we're looking good. Now, also students are asked about their comments. So based on the work that they had provided, that is the comments they provided, the comments were split up and were themed under two particular themes. So we'll call them learning-centric and rule or norm-centric comments. So examples of those where students put themselves as learners first as opposed to being student first. That is simply playing the game of school, but rather focusing their efforts on learning. We see comments that include words such as learning differently from others, growing on feedback, not learning entirely by lecture and asking questions. The rule under norm-centric comments, not that they're not important, rather they are, because it does allow for us to create a respectful environment and to have respectful discourse with one another. Students mentioning that they're open to what others have to say, they'd like to feel that they're a part of the classroom, that they're represented, and that people should have the opportunity to question. So based on those results, nearly 20% of the comments were learning-centric. But as you can see that from the beginning of the semester, we have just over half of the students who weren't sure what to say, who were a bit perhaps unclear about the intention of the prompt. So in we go into our study, the diagnostic is done, and we're ready to see if we can change or move the needle on some of those numbers. So how do we make this a way to teach and learn? So throughout the video, please do feel free to stop, back it up, take some time to reflect and to engage with the prompts that are provided in the video. Now we're moving into the study that was done with students. So according to Sandra Herbst, it's important to let people know, and that includes our students, why we're using particular strategies and why we're using them in the moment that we are. So this is something that was done with students. That is, we are going to apply particular strategies. We're going to do some research in the moment because. And so students were made a part of this process. So I introduced the work to students through the form of a video. And you might be familiar with the work of Lucy West from Metamorphosis Teaching Communities, Teaching and Learning Communities. So this is a video of Culture of Discourse. There will be a link through the Edpuzzle video that will take you there. It is about 7 minutes in length. And again, inspirational, provocative. It will make you think, as it certainly made me think about the work that I've done here in our school. And as an anticipation guide, I would ask that you consider the following based on Lucy's presentation. So how important is talk? How much are we willing to invest? And what happens when we cultivate our own habits? So also important was not just to introduce the study to students, but rather it was also important to share that process with fellow staff members. So as part of our team meetings in working on accountable talk within our school, the process expectations for mathematics drawn from our Ontario curriculum, so that is 2005 revised, as well as the senior curriculum 2007 revised. Notice that of the processes, we have a curriculum that is based solidly on problem solving, which then helps us to develop, or then allows us to use and develop the math processes in order to generate understanding and skill. But the one thing that keeps the assembly together is communication. Thus, without that's what appears to be physically a small component, but if we lose that, the entire assembly falls apart. So talk is important, as Lucy mentioned in the video. Something else we also need to pay attention to is how particular strategies do play off or rank up against others. And it's not to say that one strategy is always best, but rather, as we well know, for continuous improvement, we need to hold on to things that are consistently working well, yet always pushing the boundaries to innovate and to try strategies, different strategies that can work for many of our students. So notice that as we move down the list, now this is drawn from John Hattie's meta-analyses. So you might be familiar with John Hattie's visible learning. Classroom discussion is within the top 10. I believe it is the 10th within the list that's there. And it reports an effect size of 0.82, which greater than 0.4. 0.4 really is the effect of any particular strategy, given a year's maturation. So for instance, one would expect that any student would make a gain, and the effect size of that gain would be 0.4 simply due to a year's maturation. Anything more than 0.4 is as a result of the a strategy that's been used. So notice that classroom discussion yields an effect size of 0.82. So that therefore is worth about 2 years of regular schooling. So these strategies, when used well, okay, and when those conditions are similar as to how they've been studied, we can expect on average these particular effect sizes. So classroom discussion is certainly effective and incredibly important. So if it's that important, then what is it that we need to do to ensure that we have well-structured classes where discussion is valued and used and students are benefiting from discussion? So once the study was introduced to students and shared with staff members, we now have to structure or culture the environment that includes the physical learning environment in order to provide students with a forum through which they can practice, through which they can exercise accountable talk. So based on the work from Dr. Peter Laljedal from Simon Fraser University, if you look at the series of gears on the bottom left, you're going to notice that the largest gear or wheel mentions good tasks, vertical non-permanent surfaces, which is whiteboards used in the vertical as opposed to writing on a desk, along with visibly random groups. So these three things are strategies that can be used quickly and will have an effective and profound impact on student learning and teachers teaching in a very short period of time. And you can see in the chart to the right that the data there suggests that using VNPSs allows students to spend more time on task and to participate more often and to persist longer with tasks. Now, based on the work in my own practice and in other classes here at our school, we're now starting to see the culture growing. That is, we're focused on building thinking classrooms with staff and students. So we have whiteboards around the perimeter of our intermediate classes. We also have whiteboards in our senior mathematics classes as well. Now, because it is a study about accountable talk and also having students being accountable to the talk, what better way to have them maintain their accountability and their contributions to the classroom environment than to take note of and to track the work that they are doing, specifically related to talk. So although they're tracking their development of concept, they're also tracking their ability to communicate effectively through the use of talk moves. Now, based on some research or some reading of my own, so using NCTM's principles to action, along with the 5 practices, also an NCTM publication, and then making student thinking visible from Lucy West, each of these were used to help develop the criteria that students were using within the classroom. So those talk moves are as follows, and I will post a copy of this to the website so you have a chance to see it as well. And please feel free to use any or all parts of it. And by all means, feel free to let me know how it works out for you. Again, these were drawn from those particular sources. Now at the conference, it's always a good idea, that is at a math conference, to be doing some math. With respect to this online environment, and basically providing a summary of the presentation, you're more than welcome to engage with the problem, but the problem had been designed or had been found and used within the presentation setting to allow participants the opportunity to vicariously experience what it would be like working with others along with the talk moves during the course of solving a math problem. So to remain accountable to the group, those posters, or the poster that was shown to you earlier, just moments ago, those were posted around the perimeter of the room, much like in my classroom. And here is a prompt for members to explain and restate, etc., compare, revoice their thinking to others during the course of solving the following problem. This problem, courtesy of Dr. Christine Sertam from the University of Ottawa here in Ontario, is drawn from a publication, or rather a monograph from the Ministry of Education here in Ontario called Making Space for Students to Think Mathematically. Do feel free to engage in the problem just to try on some of the math. Now, following the experience that is a classroom experience, it is good to level your lesson. So whether it be the concept or the talk at key times. So that is where you feel that most people have found a way into the problem and are starting to generate some work and or some solutions. For us as teachers within a presentation setting or a workshop setting, the debrief is going to circle or center around our talk. So here are a few prompts for you to consider, even now, as you perhaps pause the video and think about how these might relate to you and or to your school. So prompt number one, how might you and or your students go about documenting your observations, conversations during the course of this type of work? Prompt number two, how might you and your students go about incorporating talk moves into assessment for, or as, perhaps, of learning? And your final prompt, what might your class, school, or family of schools look like or sound like by utilizing talk moves in this kind of way, or perhaps in other ways that you're thinking about? So please take a moment to engage in those prompts and to share your thinking. Now let's circle back to the work being done by students. Study's been introduced, we're beginning the work, we're looking at tracking our moves within our class. Now it's time for students to offer up their voice in a different way, and that's in the way of being the researcher, that is, of taking an active stance in inquiry. So those talk moves were presented back to students with some results, and I asked them to take a look at their template, that is the template of moves, and just decide if any clarification was required. Following that review, students were also asked if they felt, is there anything missing from our form, anything that needs to be revised or removed? And that way it helped to build a sense of ownership over the process and the contributions being made to the class and beyond. Students were also asked to develop an index. So what constitutes a particular rating? So looking at tallying the occurrence of particular moves that they were noticing of themselves and of other groups in the classroom. And that gave them the ability to quantify or perhaps qualify the level or the degree of math talk occurring in the classroom. Now we're at the end of the study. So we've gone a full-on semester. students working alongside myself and with one another. So if we look at from October to January 2017, we now have a sector of that circle which is now specific to those who are in strong agreement that there is a great expectation on them to present their thinking in math class. So a very sizable shift. Question number 2, moving again from October to January 2017, we now have stronger or more students reporting strong agreement and very few now showing uncertainty about the following, that their ideas, their understandings are going to be taken seriously by others. And last but not least, which was an interesting result, I will say that much, just to be expected during the course of research. So a slight drop in those who felt that arriving at a conceptual understanding was better done through reasoned inquiry. So you can see in semester 1, we had 45% in agreement, 20 with strong agreement. We see that those numbers are down. So the strong agreement remains high, yet those who are in agreement, we do see a drop there, with more of them sort of wavering kind of on the neutral side of things. As for how to account for that drop, that's wherein lies more research or further research into this type of study. So upon replication, if this type of result occurs again, then I would need to, and our teams would need to think about investigating what might be the root cause. Also, comments were collected again from students. So when you examine the quality of the comments versus what happened at the beginning of the semester, you can see that there is certainly a greater degree of complexity, perhaps, to the comments. And again, a lot of keywords coming up that would have come out through student work over the course of the semester. So questioning, explaining, disagreeing, reasoning and explaining, along with challenging and discussing ideas. Again, the rule and norm-centric comments were there, but what is most reassuring is the following. So if you recall back in October, 20% of comments were learning-centric, and just over half of the class not sure as to how to comment. Whereas in January 2017, the number of learning-centric comments had doubled, with a significant drop as to those who were unsure. And in fact, it almost looks as though those who were unsure, that 20% went directly into those learning-centric comments. So I was very pleased with the end result of the work done by students in our class. So you'll remember this prompt from the beginning. How do we make this the way we teach and learn? But more importantly, how do we do it as a school learning team? How do we do that to ensure that it's not just within our own practice, but that it is within the practices of each and every one of us? That is, if we value talk, if we believe that talk has an impact on student learning, then how do we share that with others? So as a model for our own school, and referencing Peter Liljedahl's work, this is a graphic from one of his studies available online as a PDF. If you were to Google Thinking Classrooms, Peter Liljedahl, this should be one of the first hits that you'll see upon doing a Google search. So stage 1 describes beginning lessons with tasks using VNPS and VRGs, or visibly random groupings. So those have a certain degree of bluntness, that is, it is very quick and easy to apply those particular moves. The other ones, I'll just quickly define some of them. They are within his study. Oral instructions are good so that the exercise doesn't become one of decoding. Defronting the room does lend itself to generating or making the focus more about student thinking as opposed to looking to their teacher to sort of lead things. Answering questions is how you choose to answer. So questions that could be asked by students are those that stop thinking or those that will extend. So we need to be careful in how we do respond to students. Stage 3, the difficulty of implementation goes up because we're certainly dealing more and more with those pedagogies that help to impact student learning. As you noticed with the work of John Hattie, assessment is something that it has a profound impact on students. So you can see that's here in stage 3 and requires the most of our attention and the most of our skill as professional educators. Leveling is picking that moment in time and the type of work to discuss with students so that the whole class begins to develop an understanding of the concept being studied. Okay. Flow relates to the tips and extensions that you would provide for students to maintain their engagement. So in year 1, that is 2015-16, we looked at introducing more of the blunt, or I should say instruments that have a higher degree of bluntness to them. Year 2, which is the current year, the year in which the study is being done, we have our stage 1 instruments throughout with a greater focus in intermediate grades, not as of yet in secondary, but in intermediate grades, grades 7 and 8, for the stage 2 and 3 elements, particularly with a focus on how we level and how we offer up assessment. So assessment, of course, assessment for learning and as learning being done in the moment amongst other forms. Year 3, so projecting ahead to the future, there should be an increased emphasis on sustaining professional learning through cycles of inquiry. So what we would expect to see would be an if-then statement and then criteria set into place that would focus our attention around utilizing stage 2 and 3 with greater emphasis on the work that is doing the work in stage 3. Those that require our most skill and the most effort on our part as professional educators. And last but not least, a particular practice that can have a profound impact upon our own perception, our own skill, and that of students is a co-teaching model. So considering a 7 to 12 secondary school model, bridging practice between grades 7 and 8 and 9 through 12 will have a profound impact. So if we are teaching together, we can expect greater long-term and sustained performance coming not only from us, but from our students, and certainly allowing our school to continuously improve. So before we go, again, I'd like to thank you for your time that you've offered up in listening to the presentation. And I will close with this prompt once again, just to sort of help us round out our thinking. So again, thank you very much for joining me for Growing Student Mindsets with the Thinking Classroom, developing collaborative and dynamic learning environments in mathematics. Again, please feel free to reach out through the contact information to respond to the prompts in Edpuzzle, and I will certainly respond to you as well. And another thing you can do is if you do enjoy this presentation, if you've had a chance to check out the website that you're on, and it's something that you believe in and you have a moment to comment, please feel free to add to the blog, that is to comment to the blog, and help us to generate some discussion around what is a very timely and important topic, and that is student voice, culturing that voice, and helping students feel empowered to make changes for themselves and their own learning.